Hi everyone, good afternoon. We will get started with this webinar in just a few minutes when the time is 2:30. Thank you. Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar, Selecting a Quality Health Education Curriculum, Understanding Your Needs, Culture, and Best Practices. My name is Jana Simon. I'm a program director here at the Illinois Public Health Institute, and we're excited to have you join us today. So this is me. I will be your moderator and speaker this afternoon. And I just wanted to shout out really quickly to our intern, Christina Zaleski, who has helped us develop this webinar. So thank you, Christina. And a list of resources at the end of the slides that will be available to you if you look at the handouts part of the webinar on the right toolbox. So a little bit about the Illinois Public Health Institute briefly. We are a nonprofit organization with an interest in improving health and quality of life across the state. We do so by pulling together partners across a variety of sectors and are really interested in the intersection of health and education and school health. We have been doing work on improving physical education in Illinois for a number of years, and we helped to staff the state task force that was charged with revising the state learning standards for physical development health several years ago. So with that, I will move us through today's webinar, and we have two great guest speakers with us today. So Ashley Hartke and Lauren Reinking have been doing health education work at Blue Ribbon Award-winning school, Matea High School, for a number of years, and they will be joining us to tell us about their curriculum and health education practices in their district. And so I'm going to give a brief background, and then they'll speak about their work, and then I'll go into more information about other tools and resources available for health education. Our objectives for today's webinar are here on the screen. We do want to increase knowledge and awareness of a variety of resources, including the HECAT tool, which is to help analyze health education curriculum and make sure it meets your students' needs, increasing awareness of state and national health education standards, increasing awareness of resources to help you in the development of your curriculum, and also increase awareness of an Illinois-based best practice example. Just a little bit of housekeeping. Your webinar toolbar to the right can help you do all sorts of things, including chat us with questions or let us know if something has gone haywire. You can chat us and we'll try to help you troubleshoot on the side. So you'll see that there, and please feel free to type in your questions and we will leave time for that at the end. So to get us started with an introduction, we want to talk about the importance of health education. I think many of you on this call are probably aware of this, but many people only remember receiving quote-unquote health education for one semester in high school, whereas comprehensive health education should be occurring from kindergarten through 12th grade to ensure that students are learning the knowledge, skills, and attitudes they need for a lifetime of health. Illinois state standards for physical development and health provide schools a roadmap for what students need to learn and achieve throughout their education. Health education teaches students about physical, mental, emotional, and social health, preventing disease and reducing risk behavior. These are important topics to understand and skills to know as students develop into independent adults. There are a lot of additional benefits to health education, particularly that it promotes learning in other subjects. Studies have shown that 3rd and 4th graders who received comprehensive health education had higher reading and math scores than similarly aged students who did not. An additional benefit is that well-established fact that healthier students lead to better attendance and higher grades. And while providing a standards-based health education curriculum, it's important to be comprehensive and use effective methods. And here's what I mean by that. Effective means you're focused on clear health goals, it's research-based and theory-driven, it addresses individual beliefs, values, attitudes, and social pressures. It provides functional health knowledge, giving students the ability to access, understand, and communicate and advocate for basic health information and services. It's age and developmentally appropriate, and it provides opportunities to reinforce skills. And by comprehensive, it's broad in scope and context. It addresses numerous health problems, issues, or topics, and it includes a set of instructional strategies and learning activities for students in pre-K all the way through 12th grade to acquire their knowledge, attitudes, and skills to address multiple health outcomes. So we're going to go ahead and launch a poll for our audience today. We are interested in finding out how many of you have used the health education curriculum analysis tool, HECAT, previously, or to look at your health education curriculum. So it's just a simple yes or no poll. So we're going to go ahead and launch that. And you could let us know if you've ever used HECAT. We would love to know. So the poll is open. I'll give you just a few more seconds to fill that out. All right, last chance, and let's go ahead and close it. So we're going to post the results. So it looks like 80% of you have not and 20% of you have, and that's about what we expected to see. So according to the chairperson of the Blue Ribbon Committee for Health Education in Illinois, only one school that she's ever worked with has used the HECAT tool. And so introducing this tool to you today can hopefully help you engage in analyzing your curriculum and improving the comprehensiveness and effectiveness of that. Before we jump into that, though, I do want to go ahead and turn it over to Ashley and Lauren to tell us a little bit more about their story at Matea High School and in Indian Prairie Hills District about their health education curriculum. So Ashley and Lauren, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I will advance the slides when you're ready.
Okay, my name is Lauren Reineking, and this is my 12th year teaching, and I have been at Matea Valley for 8 years, and been working alongside Ashley all of those years. So you can introduce yourself.
I am Ashley Harkey, and as well in Matea Valley. I've been at Matea Valley for 9 years. We both actually started our teaching careers at Neuqua Valley, so in the district. So, you know, we moved to Matea Valley from Neuqua, so the curriculum didn't change too much. So we've been doing the same curriculum now for 13 or so years total.
We had the luxury, too, of walking into a curriculum that was already pretty good. This is not a boxed curriculum. This is something that everybody that is involved in our district health has had, you know, a say in, and we are we're lucky enough to get curriculum time, and we make edits as we go. So I guess before we dive into that, we can tell you just a little bit about our curriculum. We do have 2 different classes here, sophomore health, which is, you know, the requirement, and then we also have a junior senior elective called advanced health that's been pretty successful, and we're working on developing an advanced health 2 right now, district wide. Go ahead.
We have been awarded the Blue Ribbon Award. We actually last year did it again for the renewal. So we've had it now for 6 or so years. What's nice is, like Lauren said, we're giving lots of curriculum time, really whenever it's needed, within reason. We obviously don't abuse that, but the district allows us to work with Nico Vanzi. We're fortunate enough to know the two other high schools. All of us, we're a smaller department compared to some of those core classes. So it's really easy for us to send them an email. All of us are kind of working together, sharing new stuff. But again, that district has given us that curriculum time at the high school level, but then for the middle school level, once a year in August. So we come back to school, we kind of have 3 work days before students come. One of those work days is we meet as a district, and so we are given a few hours in the morning to meet with the middle schools as well. So that's nice. And one of the teachers at Wabanzi is kind of like the glue between all the schools. And so she kind of works to make sure everyone is on the same page. And so it's not often, it's once a year, but it's still enough time to kind of meet, check in, see what they're doing, new speakers, new projects. We, know what we can build on with the students coming in sophomore year.
And then just on a weekly basis, at our school, we have about 5 health teachers that kind of have different classes throughout. Ashley and I are always health. The other teachers have a little bit of PE on their plates as well. But just within our building, we always have PLC weekly meeting time, and we all work really well together. It's a kind of a special little group that I feel like we have here, where everyone gets along and we all, are able to hear each other's ideas and build on, everything that we already have. And then everything's aligned also with standards.
Yeah, so it's really nice when you have a student coming from another high school in the district. They're walking into a classroom where it's a little different, but the core stuff that we're doing is the same. Our philosophy is the real test is when you walk out the door. That's, kind of said often in all 3 high schools, so that's nice. More about the curriculum. It's all based on state standards, national standards. It's tied into the social emotional learning standards. So everything we do is, and we'll talk more about this later. We can probably go on to the next slide. Everything we do is based on those standards. We have about 3,000 students. Our classes have anywhere from 32 to 35 students per class. We have a wide variety of students, as I'm assuming most high schools, lots of different languages, culture, social, economic status. We have lots of different types of learners, special education, all of it in one class, which tends to be kind of unique too. That's maybe the core classes don't see, but we have a wide variety of students. So we try to have curriculum that accounts for all of that. We're big advocates in terms of like modification. We try not to have to make too many modifications because it's hard to modify health. They need this. And so our curriculum is able to kind of meet the needs of every student in our class, just because, you can always modify health. So that's something we're kind of proud of here, is that, all different types of students should be able to feel comfortable and safe and learn with our curriculum.
We're really cautious too with how we reach out to all different cultures and everything, and kind of embrace all of our types of students. We have, because of our diverse population, not all of our kids go on to college, or they might try to go on to college, and some might boomerang back. So we want to always kind of talk about different goals after high school in terms of our nutrition unit. We want to make sure that we include all types of diets. We have a pretty high rate of kiddos who, if we're looking at like carbohydrates, a lot of their diet has rice in it or whatever. And we have to just be careful about how we word all of those things. We talk about mental health, and, some of our kids go home to houses where, parents still don't believe in mental health, yet they're, struggling just to function here every day. So we try to really give them, make them feel empowered as to how they can reach out to get help on their own, even without support at home. And then with our student population, we also are really careful with the wording and things that we use during our relationship unit, and also even just like reproduction and sexual decision making, making sure that we're inclusive of all types of relationships and all types of Gender, we differentiate too in our class a little bit, the difference between gender identity and things like that too. So we're able to talk about a lot in our district, which is also really helpful because that makes it easier for us to be inclusive because we can, talk about all of those things. Want to move on to writing curriculum? Yeah. None of this is probably super earth-shattering here, but of course it's fact-based and it's current. That's something that we really try to stay on top of. And again, even between the 3 schools, if someone finds something out, we will shoot an email right away and try to help each other out in regards to like laws and whatnot. We always give sources not only for our content, but also for like resources beyond the classroom. With all of the guest speakers we bring in, there are local organizations where kids can go to them for help if they need it. I think some of the stuff we kind of said, we see ourselves, we're really careful with the language that we use in the classroom. And we really try to foster an environment where the kids can talk and share, and we step back as more of a facilitator rather than the old school style teacher. We like to listen and not just talk.
And I think that's really important, especially, so Lauren and I are the main health teachers, and so we have a couple of other teachers who've been doing it, teaching for a while, teaching health for a while, but as they come into the health classroom, it's different than the PE classroom. You have to be very cautious on your biases and, making sure the way you're teaching is fact-based, hitting the standards. You're not putting your ideas into it. They should not know what your opinion on, what your opinions on a topic might be. You have to be ready to handle, if a student says, how do you feel about this? Or what do you think about this? It might be, seemingly like it's not a big deal, but just you sharing your opinion on that, you could potentially isolate a student. They could change their perception of you and what you're teaching. So I think that's one thing that we feel is really important, that as teachers, you're ready to handle those questions, especially if you're a new teacher, a younger teacher, you're not isolating kids because of those biases that you might have. And we also understand that, health is fluid. It changes all the time. We're always, like Lauren mentioned, looking at what we're saying and, have the facts changed on this as well. And then it's also, we'll get into this more too, but in terms of skills, students need to be able to find out this information on their own. Doctors talk about they don't want people going to like Dr. Google, but at the same time, that is a skill to be able to go and like research different health conditions and find out more. And so when the teacher is able to step back as a facilitator, they're helping the student be able to develop that skill. And some of our activities allow for that to happen, for students to open up more, especially as they get older, going into college classes. They need to be able to express their viewpoints, their opinions when talking about sensitive opinion-based topics as well. I guess the other thing really quick too is we're cautious when we're teaching some of the topics. Like I saw that, I gave the example of depression, that when we're talking about different warning signs and symptoms, that's in general, that it may not be exactly true in every case. And that's just another way to kind of include all students and all their stories, all their experiences. They might see one thing, might not see the other thing. So that's something that we're mentioning all the time too, that they might see something a little different or it may not look exactly like it, typical.
Okay, when it comes to what we decide to put in our curriculum and how we maybe edit on the fly, because sometimes things happen in a semester and we sometimes need to cut or we don't have enough time, or this semester we had all these crazy snow days, so there's feels like there's more. Our district isn't always great at dividing semester 1 and 2 equally, so sometimes we have to kind of edit our curriculum as we go. So when we're doing things like that, and even when we're just developing our curriculum as is, the student is the number one. That's what we always like to think about and focus on. And we are always trying to think, okay, what do they need to know when they walk out our door? What do we want them to take away? What is the most important? And we prioritize things in that nature. We oftentimes will try to think through, okay, do we care more about them knowing the skill to do this, or do we care more about them, getting the test question right? And we always, are leaning more towards like that skill-based level. That's always trumps the test score. So we kind of like to dig deeper and find the things that are the takeaway lessons in everything that we do. And sometimes we have found that, we're doing things just because we think we're supposed to do things. So for example, we had a nutrition project paper. Part of that paper, leading up to the paper, we did an outline where they were supposed to draft that. And we were really short on time last semester, so we said, hey, let's forget the paper and just have them do this outline in a real thorough way. And we ended up liking that better. We kind of said like, well, that was an added step that wasn't necessary. So we're not afraid to make those types of changes if need be. And sometimes that's where we come up with some of our best stuff, is like on the fly like that. Oh, let's try this, and we do.
Yeah, and again, that's where too teachers have to maybe consider their bias. What you feel is super important, is that truly important to the kids right now in their life? So, we feel like we want to teach all this stuff, but you really don't have time to teach everything. So what could you maybe do a brief kind of intro on, and what is really important for them right now as a teen, high school, going into college? What do they really need to know? And then that allows us to do activities, and to do those activities well. If we can't do it well, if we can't allow the point to be made without, that purpose should be very evident, then we probably shouldn't be doing it and using the time elsewhere. An example, and I have a picture of this coming up later on, we do these storybook activities where students have to create storybooks featuring the male and female reproductive system. And it's a great activity. Students have so much fun with it. And because of that, it takes a little longer. And for them to really do it, for them to really review the activity and use the activity in a storybook that actually makes sense, that isn't rushed, it does take a couple of days, but those are purposeful days. And so they're really understanding the curriculum. We also spend a lot of time keeping the work in the classroom. We really don't give too much homework, just because we think it's important as the health teacher to process. And you can go do a great activity, but if you don't process it with the students, oftentimes it can be kind of pointless. So we think the kids, by reading it, they get the point, but often they don't, and they need the class to talk about it and to focus in on the purpose of the assignment, the goal of the assignment. We hope that all the students, every assignment we do, the students can connect it back to some of those goals we want them to have, and the reasons why they're in health. And that's because we spend a lot of time processing that and connecting that. We don't just send them home with a worksheet and that's it. It's all about the processing.
Ashley had mentioned that this is kind of our motto across the entire district, is the real test is when you walk out the door. The kids know this. It's literally hanging over every single district door. And it kind of speaks for itself, but it's that whole idea of why are you here, and why does the state mandate you to take this class? Like, what is the purpose? And we kind of revisit that, constantly throughout our semester, because, we have kids who are so concerned about a grade, and really, we don't really care about grades. We want them to do well, but we don't want them to, that's not the end all be all. How are they applying what they know and what we talk about here? So the whole idea is having them make good decisions that are going to, shape them in the future and also now. So what goes into our decision making, we kind of set up our whole semester based on this idea of why do we do the things that we do? And the answer to that is our habits, our values, and our perceptions. We have like 4 days of activities where we are kind of having them put those things into words, or at least put some thought to them so that they can articulate them to other people. Because oftentimes those are just like so intrinsically in us, we don't even explore them. So we kind of kickstart the semester like that. And we also have them kind of start to focus in on their future a little bit. One of our favorite days is our life questions, when they have about 9 different questions. Are they in there? I forget. No. They're 9 different questions that just kind of have them map out what they think their life will be, and without all of those crazy pressures that they sometimes feel. We have them answer those as best they can right now, and then we talk about them in class, and it just is this perfect introduction to our semester, because the last question on there is what could get in the way of those things, and that's where we come up with, addiction, and unplanned pregnancy and disease and all those things that we're going to talk about in our semester, and how they can literally stop them dead in their tracks and prevent some of those goals. So we circle back to that constantly.
And the life questions are nice too, because oftentimes in high school it's very focused on what's your major and where do you want to go to college, and that still is a pretty small piece of their life. If you look at the whole timeline of their life, we want to go beyond that. And again, considering our biases, not all students might be thinking about college. So we talk about, what are goals that you have? What are some things you want to accomplish? What do you want to have one day? What do you want to do one day? What do you want to see? What do you want your future relationships to be like? What do you want to be like when you're 50 years old? And so that's all, to talk about goal setting and why it's so important to have goals, and how having goals can help you make healthy choices. And not all your goals have to be directed just college and career. Obviously, that's a big important part, but there are so many other pieces to a person that having goals can still help them make healthy choices in friends and health habits and all of that. This next picture is actually our me trees. So just kind of show you what we're talking about. The me trees on the front, this is the cover that they can see when we hang it up on the wall. They have to draw their strengths and talents and abilities, or they have to write out all the accomplishments that they've had. Not, go beyond just what they've actually received a trophy for, but what are some things that they're really proud of? Are they proud of the relationship they have with the parent? Is it talent that they have? Is that they're resilient? We try to kind of focus on that, and throughout the semester we're reflecting on those strengths and talents. Those are going to take you, help you achieve all the goals that you have in life. So it's all connecting it to those big points. The real test is when you walk out the door. Why are you here? Decision making, goals, all that stuff. Our assignments, we do try to have assignments that are skill-based. Again, we think about what do they need to be a healthy adult. And one is a nutrition project, where instead of just researching the nutrition, they take a look at their diet that they have today. And instead of looking at numbers of carbs, fats, proteins, they look at their whole diet. And is it well-rounded? Is it complete? Yeah, they might have junk food, but are they getting a lot of fruits and vegetables and all of that? So they're actually taking a look at their individual diet and then connecting it long-term, short-term to health. We do a best advice project where they have to make a video of themselves, literally providing their good best advice to a friend. What would they say? What are they noticing that they're concerned about? How they could get help? Why they should get help? So again, they're practicing that conversation, even though it's just with themselves. They're practicing that conversation on what they could say to help someone. We do a contraception activity where they actually have to analyze different couples and sexual relationships. And they're playing doctor, and they're pretending what I think is best for that couple, if they need short-term pregnancy prevention, STD prevention, all that stuff. So that's a skill.
Doctor diagnosis is something that we do with STDs. It's a skill-based assessment as well, where they're actually role-playing doctor and patient. And they have, they switch those roles, they play both of them, but the idea is one student is going to basically pick an STD that they're going to pretend to have, so they have a little fun with it too, which sounds a little odd, but they do. And then they'll describe those symptoms. The doctor has to ask those questions. And not only is this a good way to learn about STDs, but it's also an excellent way for them to understand that their parents aren't always going to be in the room with them when they go to the doctor, and they need to advocate for themselves. They need to ask questions. They don't just take what a doctor says and leave it at that. The doctor's there to guide them. And some of those conversations are hard. Some students really struggle with doctor diagnosis. And that's when I kind of learning moment and spin it and say, well, now could you imagine if you actually were having those real issues in your genitals, and now you're having to explain that to another adult that's a really hard thing to do. And it's a skill they need to learn.
I actually have pictures of each one. So do you mind clicking to the next slide? So this kind of shows you the rubric for the nutrition project. We personally think that this is a great way for them to truly connect diet to disease, which is the importance of nutrition and body function. The next slide is the best advice rubric. So again, it kind of tells them exactly what we want them to do. We want them kind of in the middle of the slide, it says, is your video long enough to get your point across? Are you showing compassion and empathy, which is so important in our society? Are you helping your friend develop emotional resiliency? So again, those are all skills that we think is so important that they leave our classrooms with. The next one is the contraception activity. You can see some of these sexual relationships. It's kind of hard. And so they have to go to that CDC website and kind of decide what they think is best. Again, these are life skills. One day they might have to decide if they need a contraception and what their needs are. And there are so many options out there. So it's important that they have the skills to read through medical information and find out what's best for them. The next one is what Lauren mentioned, the doctor diagnosis. So we do give them a script, and that is basically to help them ask questions, and they have to come up with the answers. So they pick the STD that they have, and they have to go over those symptoms, and that doctor has to be ready to tell them about, treatment or cure and, all that. So really fun. But if you're going through this, I mean, the average person might struggle going over these answers as well. And so that's one thing we want them to leave here being comfortable with and having that advocacy. The next one, this one is an addiction project we have them do where they have to try to give up a habit. Snapchat or we're using chapstick or chewing gum. There's no addictive component there, but it's just habit, and the kids struggle. And so that's another processing. Do you see how hard it could be when someone is actually giving up something that has that physical, psychological addiction? Just again, to develop some empathy, for them to understand it a little bit more.
This is so good. I mean, the things that they struggle with are things that are, it's just their daily habit, but for them to actually try to give it up, they can't, honestly. A lot of them can't. They try and they can't do it. So again, just great teaching point. Then we kind of switch, if you want to click to the next one. The next list that we have is things that help us to facilitate and help the kids to which we've addressed a little bit already, but things to get the kids starting to talk on their own. Maybe we'll guide a conversation, but let them kind of work through some things. Do these all pair too?
Yeah, so if you hit next.
These are the life questions that we talked about in the next slide. So you can see they're missing a few, but you can see what what we're getting at with those. And we kind of already talked about that one, so you could probably move to the next as well.
So this one is a cancer exploration where they have to actually use different websites to answer some of the questions about cancer. And so we think that's important, that they know how to research a disease and figure out, some basic knowledge. The next one is what I've already mentioned. Those are our reproductive storybooks. Again, this is a great example of them actually using the content and applying it. This does take a couple of days, but it's good.
The last one is actually the first part that kind of introduces an article called Neglected Heart that talks about the emotional dangers and emotional risks of premature sexual involvement. We have them do this ahead of time. They read the article, and then they actually bring some discussion questions to their peers. So this is just kind of a snapshot of some of the stuff that we do. And while we're showing you activities, the actual purpose of it is those skills. And that's, our priority, I think, in our curriculum is equipping them to actually, face life now and in the future, hopefully.
There's no chapter reading, to read the chapter and take notes. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Ashley and Lauren. We did have a couple questions, but I think it was covered. People asking if they could see a copy of those 9 questions, but at least 7 of those questions were in the slide. So I don't know if there's, if you could send all 9 to us and we could send it to those participating in the webinar.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we have our email addresses there too. So if they heard something they were interested in, they want more information, they're able to email us. We don't mind sending out anything.
We'll share anything.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I didn't see any other questions come through for you. So thank you again so much for joining us today. And I think we'll go ahead and move on to the next parts of the webinar, unless there's any final, I don't think there's any final things coming through. So, all right. Well, thank you again. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
All right. So now we're going to go ahead and move on to the next webinar objective, and I think give a little bit more of tools and resources you can use to try to create or develop or modify your health education curriculum to better meet best practices. So the first thing we want to do is make sure you're aware of the HECAT tool. And so there are several, it's a pretty straightforward tool. It has an in-depth instruction guide for how to complete it. What you're seeing here is a couple of assessment forms that give you a better idea of what is in the HECAT. As a basic overview, you build a team at your school or district and you evaluate various components of your curriculum. Those are including but not limited to the accuracy of the curriculum, acceptability, feasibility, and affordability, as well as fundamentals of the curriculum like the learning objectives and student assessments. It's unlikely that you'll ever find one curriculum designed perfectly for what your school needs, so the analysis process can be done over multiple times across many health topics. So if you want to piece together different curriculum available online or in the world, you can do that and analyze how well they meet the needs. The HECAT covers all of the topics above listed on the slide. So healthy behaviors are addressed in a lot of these. Again, it's skill-based as well as topic-based. And so actually going back to the slide before we start the poll, so you can look those topics over really quickly. We're going to set up a poll that asks you how many of these health topic modules are covered at your school if you are working in a school. So I know many of you are teachers who are on the webinar today. So we'll go ahead and launch the poll about how many of these health topics are covered in your school. Are they all, most, as in more than 50%, some less than 50%, or none? So you can go ahead and answer that poll question. Just another second to finish answering. All right, we'll go ahead and close the poll and show the results. So it looks like about a third of you cover all of those topics. That's great. About half of you are more than 50%, and a few of you are under 50% of those topics. So a good mix, but it looks like most of you are covering most of what's in HECAT. So the HECAT might be a great tool for you to use to assess the strength of your curriculum. The next objective of the webinar, oh, and I will say there's, I think there's a slide at the end with a link to the tool. So you can link directly to the tool if you want to learn more about using it, but we highly encourage you to check out the tool and use it against your curriculum. Sorry for the horn outside our office. You could hear that. So the next objective, we really want to increase your understanding of the state and national health education standards. So as many of you know, what are learning standards? They are concise, clearly articulated descriptions of what students should know and be able to do from one stage of their education to the next. So really, if you look at the end goal of what K through 12 education has, the learning standards tell you where students should be at the end of all of their journey. It's important to create standards-based curriculum. So in order to do so, you'll want to become very familiar with the state learning standards for physical development and health and the national health education best practice standards. And so we'll provide a brief overview of both of those. So here are the 6 physical health and development learning standards in the state of Illinois. Their learning goals 19 through 24. The bottom 3 are the most focused on health, although all of them work together between both physical education and health education courses over the course of the student's career. So again, these are a mix of work on health promotion and prevention and treatment, human body systems, and communications and decision making. Here's just a quick example. It's a more in-depth look at State Goal 24 and the indicator B. So what this is showing is these are performance descriptors of what a student might be able to do across from early elementary to late high school. And this is related to applying decision-making skills to the promotion of individual, family, and community health. So in early elementary, they might be able to recognize how their choices affect health. You know, brushing your teeth may prevent tooth decay, etc. Middle and junior high, they're able to apply decision-making to an individual health concern. And maybe by late high school, they can explain immediate and long-term impacts of health decisions to their family and their community. So as you can see, you can all of this is available on the State Board of Education's website, and you can take a look at what the state goals are and sort of their sub components, as well as the performance descriptors, which explain this sort of alignment of these things across grade levels. There are also national standards, the National Health Education Standards, and were developed to provide teachers, school administrators, and policymakers with a framework for designing or selecting curriculum, gathering resources, and assessing students. There are expectations of what students should be able to know and do by grades 2, 5, 8, and 12. And all the modules in the HECAT use these national standards as a framework for determining how likely a student is to master the knowledge and the skills. After almost 25 years after development, the standards have been used in almost all states. So I'm going to point out a little bit of this. As a broad generalization, Illinois health education standards are more content-based, whereas these might be more skill-based. And both the national and state standards have similar content, similar knowledge, but they do differ a little bit. So they have self-management, accessing information, and they align, so standard 3 and 7 are not as well reflected in Illinois standards, so we just wanted to point these out to you that standard 7, students can demonstrate the ability to practice health-enhancing behaviors and avoid and reduce health risks, and students will demonstrate the ability to access valid information, products, and services. So those are 2 skills that are not as well reflected that you may want to consider including in your curriculum as well. And just to note the difference between skill versus content, transitioning to a skills-based style of teaching from a content-based can be difficult to make, but there's an advantage to students. So children, especially those that are from disadvantaged communities, need to be equipped with knowledge, attitudes, beliefs, and skills that will help them face challenges and make healthy life choices. And evidence has shown that skills-based curriculum for things like HIV and STD prevention, reproductive health, violence, and tobacco and substance use prevention is more effective than simply teaching content on those topics. And so use the content as context for the skill. So for an example, as you can see, a single health topic can be used as the context for teaching more than one health skill, as you can see on the slide. And many health skills go hand in hand. So in this example, decision-making and analyzing influences are both equally well paired with the topic of alcohol and substance use. And I think we heard that in the Indian Prairie example, that they were really focusing on skills. Their assignments were skill-based, and they were using topics to help the students discover those skills. So using the standards, we always encourage a backwards design approach. So always work with identifying the desired results. What is the ultimate knowledge and skill you want the students to know? And the standards can help you determine that. Determine what's acceptable evidence. What kind of assessment will you use? And then plan your learning experiences and instruction based on that. So using the state standards for physical development health and national standards can really help you create a backwards design for your curriculum. And then if you already have a curriculum, using the HECAT to assess your strengths, and then using, again, backwards design to fill in the gaps is the best way to go. And just a few more, there are also guidelines in Illinois. So these are not part of the state standards, but there are sex education guidelines. So whether it says if your school district does choose to provide sex education, curriculum is required to be developmentally and age appropriate, medically accurate, and evidence-based and complete. It requires comprehensive sex education offered in grades 6 through 12 to include instruction on both abstinence and contraception for the prevention of pregnancy and STDs. And so key takeaways here are developmentally and age appropriate, medically accurate, and evidence-based, and a combination of both abstinence and contraception education. So this is from the Illinois School Code. So while sex education is not required in Illinois, if you do choose to do it, it needs to be comprehensive. And there are also some nutrition guidelines, education guidelines. The components of effective nutrition education are different than general health education. So nutrition education should adhere to the USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture's dietary guidelines for Americans. It should include food literacy, food preparation skills, and physical activity. And it should focus on behavior change that would devote an adequate amount of time to the topics. So there's a whole resource guide here on nutrition education you can see on your screen from the this one's from California Public Schools that takes what the USDA recommends and provides some guidelines on that. So it might be something you want to look at. And so finally, we want to increase some awareness of resources that can aid you in the development of curriculum that's appropriate to your school's culture and needs and the diversity of students you may be teaching. So characteristics to consider that may be adding diversity to your student body, race and ethnicity, disability status, rural versus urban, economic factors, immigration status, gender and gender identity, religious affiliation, and LGBTQIA status. So these are all important groups that may have specific cultures or health needs and unique ways that your community should be addressing these needs. And if, so for example, this is not an exhaustive list as well. So for example, if your community has food access challenges, you may want to use food access as a content area to teach about how to advocate for community health. Or if your community is at increased risk for type 2 diabetes, you may want to focus on accessing valid health information and analyzing influences in healthy eating. So if you need guidance on knowing the priority population or top health concerns in your communities where you teach, we encourage you to contact your local health department or look up information in the County Health Rankings database that is held at the University of Wisconsin. So there's a lot of great local public health data out there, and we encourage you to get to know the health status of your local community and the demographics of your local community to help you make decisions around types of content areas that may be useful to the population. And generally, when dealing with diversity, there are several things you can do to help assist in the classroom and being inclusive. So being respectful of language barriers, the first thing you can do is making sure that you have, properly pronouncing your students' names, understanding the common words and language they speak and use, incorporating a lot of visuals into your lectures, as well as instructional aids to aid comprehension, use plain language, and avoid idioms and metaphors and sarcasm. The classroom itself should be reflective of content and materials and diversity, so it should have a range of cultural perspectives in what's presented, not only photos, but other types of language, menu options, et cetera, should all be culturally diverse. By age 3, children notice gender and racial differences as well as physical disabilities, so including realistic images of race, ethnicity, gender, and physical characteristics, as well as positive attitudes towards accepting of others will really help go a long way to being inclusive. I'm going to go back. There's a couple other things, having a thoughtful classroom setup. So you can see here in the picture, there's more of this round table setup here. Moving desks and furniture around in the classroom, especially in health education, can really allow for discussion and put students more at ease for sharing their thoughts. And then groups of 2 or 3 desks clumped together can also allow for more interaction and small group work. So being thoughtful about what kind of classroom setup will enhance participation and engagement is also useful. And finally, I'm sure you all know this as teachers, but getting to know your students, getting to know what it is they like to do, how their learning styles, et cetera, can help influence their ability to be included. There are social norms, cultural norms, religious norms, et cetera, that you may want to take into account. And the trickiest part of this is that there may be many factors you're trying to address across your whole student body, but getting to know your students is one of the best ways to be inclusive. And so finally, next stage of this is to point out several resources. So all of these slides have hyperlinks, so we encourage you to download the PDF handout in the section of the webinar that includes links to all of these things. But I'm not going to go over them all together, but you will see that there's a lot of comprehensive sex education resources here, both from the State Board of Education and external partners across the country that may be of interest to you. Several mental and emotional health resources on this slide. A lot of people are interested in finding out where nutrition education resources live, and there's a lot of stuff from both USDA, the FDA, federally, as well as a lot of community-based programming who have created guides and nutrition education resources. So those are here. Some other general resources around health you can see here. So obviously Shape America has a lot of great resources. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has a lot of resources specifically around healthy use. The Preventive Services Task Force has put together a community guide of effective practices, health education curriculum characteristics, and of course, there's some local organizations that have some guidance as well. These are some resources around teaching diverse students and being inclusive, so we encourage you to check these ones out, and they're, I think, general to education, but can be applied for health education. And so in summary, health education curriculum development is a journey. You can start with standards, ensure your curriculum addresses local culture and needs, and there are a lot of resources to help you along the way. So we really encourage you to take the HECAT and look at the curriculum you have in place or that you're working to improve. Take a look at the standards, making sure that you're meeting both Illinois standards and national best practices, and then taking a look at your local culture. What are your students' needs? What's the diversity? Are there topics you can switch out to help address those needs, et cetera, as you revise curriculum? And all these resources hopefully can help you on that journey to meeting your students' needs. So with that, I am going to close it up to your questions and answers. And I believe Lauren and Ashley have left the call. So if you have any questions for us, we're happy to stay on for a little bit and help you. And otherwise, we have recorded this webinar and we'll send a link to that recording. So if you want to share this with colleagues or access it on the website after the fact, you can do that as well. So with that, I will leave a few minutes. You can chat, type in questions in the chat or question box and we'll answer them in just a moment. So we'll give you a minute to see if there's any. About 30 more seconds to see if anyone's typing anything. Someone's wondering if any district has not included sex education. I'm actually unaware of what every district in Illinois is doing, so I wouldn't be able to answer that. And I don't know if there's a comprehensive listing of that anywhere. So unfortunately, I do not know the answer to that. There may be some for whatever local cultural reasons have decided not to. And someone was asking, how do you get your district to agree to sex education? I actually, if anyone else on the webinar would like to answer that, if you have sex education and had to try to create buy-in for that, I'd love for you to chat in your response. Again, we're not a school ourselves, so I wouldn't be able to answer that. We can definitely try to find best practices from around and send it out to people who've joined the webinar, though. Is anyone on the webinar willing to share anything about how you got district buy-in to provide sex education? All right, well, we can circulate that question with some of our school health experts across the state and get back to you. And then, there might be some best practices out there or things that have worked in other schools. And the person who asked that, if you want to send us a little more information about your basic demographics, if you're rural, urban, large or smaller district, that would be helpful. Any other final questions? All right, well, thank you again for joining this afternoon's webinar, and we will send out the recording and hope you have a good rest of your day. Thank you.